Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the MedTech Impact Podcast, where you get to hear from leaders and innovators who are shaping the future of medical technology. I'm Kyle Cruz.
And I'm Richard Meaglejohn.
And we're your hosts of the show.
So today on the MedTech Impact Podcast, we are delighted to be joined by Mary Beth Cicero, CEO and co-founder of 3Daughters. Mary Beth, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Richard and Kyle. I am thrilled to be here.
Well, we are equally thrilled to have you on the show. It's been a while since you were part of Impact. It was back in 2022 in our program with Hologic, dedicated around women's health. And of course, a lot has happened since that time. So looking forward to sharing the latest updates on 3Daughters. Before we get into that, though, we'd like to frame it for the audience. So please tell us all, what is the big problem that 3Daughters is looking to solve?
Well, on a large scale, 3Daughters is innovating for women's healthcare because there's a lack of innovation. And with our first product, we're developing we are addressing a significant problem, IUD insertion pain, that's been neglected for years. And we have the technology platform to address this. And this problem actually prevents many women, particularly younger women, from selecting one of the most effective forms of birth control.
And when you talk about younger women, I think one of the things you highlight in your presentation is around this has been a really trending topic, particularly through the pandemic. I mean, I think on TikTok, the hashtag IUD had 1.4 billion plus views. So can you tell us a little bit more about the sort of the problems and the pain being experienced by people who are using an IUD?
Yeah, Richard, it's so interesting because when we started, people, everybody was like, is this pain real? And we had a survey showing with 1,500 IUD users that 93% experienced pain and 62% said it was very painful to excruciating. But then all of a sudden, it just started picking up. There was a New York Times article, Getting an IUD Hurts. There was a recent article in the Washington Post. And those TikTok videos that you mentioned, I've watched them myself. And it's awful hearing literally these women scream in pain during IUD insertion.
Yeah, it's such a crazy situation that in this modern day and time that people have to go through such a process. I mean, another thing you talk about is how the design of an IUD just hasn't changed in the last 40 years.
Yeah, it's actually closer to 50, if you can believe it. It's a T-shaped plastic frame. It's got arms, dangling strings needed for removal, and everything about it is really archaic. And our platform is a frameless design. It's based on physics and geometry, and it self-assembles in the uterus, and we say conforms to a woman's body and will float gently in the uterus. And that's what we're going to show in our phase 1 study.
And, that's interesting, Mary Beth. And, you've got two males here hosting this podcast where, it's obviously a little bit hard for us to relate, but it sounds like a significant problem. There is no doubt. And, gosh, I guess as someone with 2 daughters, right? And my wife here, it's obviously a huge problem. And you talk about the difference between the current standard of care and your solution. So tell us a little bit more about your solution. What does it look like? How does it work? How is it assembled in the uterus? And maybe also like how often, does a woman have to go through this procedure?
Well, Kyle, those are all excellent questions. And I will say that we have had a lot of support from men because they'll talk to their wives or girlfriends or daughters, and they understand how real this pain is. And our answer is, it's actually pretty sweet. It's smaller than a dime. And it's these three little elliptical shapes that are inserted into the uterus individually and then form into this stable triangle. So when we say physics and geometry, the magnet is the physics and the geometry are the ellipses. And then this stable triangle just, again, conforms to a woman's body and can be, I think you asked the length of time. Some IUDs can be left in place for up to 10 years, the older ones, but all of the IUDs usually launch with 3 years worth of data. So we expect that it will be able to, once we complete our clinical trials, it can be effective for up to 3 years.
How does the magnet work?
The magnet is pretty simple. It's just a north-south pole that, the three are attracted to the opposite poles and form into this triangle.
Mhm.
And as you probably remember, Richard, this was developed at UMass Amherst by a world-renowned veterinary specialist, Dr. Carlos Gradil. And he invented it for horses because for years marbles had been inserted into the uterus of horses and glass shards would come off. So he basically proved the concept, showed that it was effective, showed that it was safe, showed that it was retained in the uterus, and that the mares went on to breed successfully in the following season.
Yeah, that's incredible that, again, it sounds such an ergonomically made device. One thing also pointing out that it doesn't have a string. I think that's a common problem with the current IUD and how often that can just be accidentally pulled out.
Yeah, the strings are, I used to just emphasize they're a nuisance factor for women and their partners, but I was writing something up for the company and I looked on the internet and it's described as fish line hanging from the cervix. Not exactly a pleasant thought or a pleasant experience. And we have a simple magnetic retriever that retrieves our IUD.
Okay, so you've got this beautifully designed product, but clearly getting this into market has a few hoops in terms of regulatory, going through a clinical process. Can you talk a little bit more now about where you are on that clinical journey?
Yes, I'd be glad to. So what's interesting is it's called a device, intrauterine device. It looks like a device, it acts like a device, but it's regulated as a drug by the FDA. And this requires a full clinical program with phase 1, 2, and 3. And right now we are completing preclinical studies and we're getting ready to file our IND, an investigational new drug that will allow us to get into the clinic next year.
And so a reasonably timed journey in terms of you're going to be, what, another 4 years, 5 years? When would you hope to get something like this?
We expect it to be a 5-year development program, and this is pretty quick for a contraceptive product. And there are a couple things we have going for us because the active pharmaceutical ingredient, copper, which the magnet is basically encased in copper shells, we have a shorter pathway with the FDA, a 505(b)(2). And because of that, it takes a lot of the clinical risk off the table because we can rely on the FDA's findings of safety and efficacy because copper has been used for years. And that makes the program a little more turnkey because we don't expect to get into phase 2 and 3 and find out it doesn't work because this dose of copper has been used extensively before.
Yeah, and copper, again, I think it's something that's a differentiator for you compared to the other solutions on the market. Can you tell us a little bit more about, the non-hormonal aspects of copper and why that's so beneficial?
Yeah, I mean, copper, as I said, it's been around for a long time. In the US market, there are 5 IUDs and 4 of them are hormone-based and only 1 is non-hormonal copper. And women have many women will use contraception on average for 30 years of their life. and they don't want long-term exposure to hormones. In fact, I think there's a survey that we quote that 70% of women are concerned with long-term exposure to hormones from their contraceptive. So we're looking to have, again, another non-hormonal option for women on the market.
And Mary Beth, I guess where do you stand right now with, this 5-year journey? Are you in that first phase?
Yes. And I mean, this market is quite large. It's 1.5 billion in the US, and it's expected to double over the next few years. And this is not a market for a young development company like 3Daughters to undertake. And my background is marketing and business development. I've done a lot of partnering in my career, and we've been in touch with all of the major players on a routine basis because everybody is looking for innovation in women's health. So we expect to partner this product early after we have the major data points, which we think will answer the remaining questions on the product and de-risk the whole clinical program.
Mm-hmm. And where do
So
you
we're
stand?
looking for
Yeah.
basically a transactional event in the next 2 years.
Okay, so what are some of those companies then that kind of would align with your contraception device?
Well, the companies in the market right now are Bayer, AbbVie, and Cooper Surgical.
Okay.
But there's what's really great is that women's health is drawing a lot of attention now. So we've seen a company like, for example, Astellas, that has been focused completely on oncology, launch a product basically I think it was last year for vasomotor symptoms. I mean, they did an ad at the Super Bowl, and that's a huge win for women's health because it draws more interest and then draws more players. And frankly, this product, we expect, and I know this sounds like a grandiose statement, but we expect could be the first billion-dollar product in women's health because that's how much, one, the significance of the market need, the significance of the problem, and in the right hands, this product could be $1 billion.
It doesn't sound either like it's, okay, so you're using copper. Obviously, copper is more expensive than, say, I don't know what the other devices are used, but it's probably, I think you mentioned maybe some type of plastic. Is that correct?
It's it's probably just a little more complicated than that, Kyle, in that the plastic on the T-shape, I mean, copper is actually cheap. I mean, it's inexpensive and it's wrapped in the current IUD, the copper wire is wrapped around the stem and there are copper sheaths on the arm. The
Okay.
great
So
thing
they're
about,
already using copper, you're saying, in the other.
right,
So, okay,
right.
cool.
Well,
And I
in
guess,
one of
yeah.
them, yeah,
So
in one of them.
the point here to this question too is that, sometimes when you hear, difference in materials, you think of cost, right?
Mhm.
One being more expensive than the other. And then obviously, you think about how long the product can, stay inside of a woman's body for. So then all of a sudden, well, the cost concerns, kind of aren't as significant because you're more or less more focused on giving women a better technology, a better experience, something that can stay inside of them for probably a significant amount of time. So just kind of thinking about those differentiating factors in that go-to-market strategy, as well as kind of any type of data that you might have today. Can you speak to any data that you're seeing in comparison to, your competitors and then your product today?
Well, I will say that IUDs are very cost effective for the length of time that they're left in.
Mm.
Um, it probably, uh, on average, is $10 a month.
Mm.
if you can believe it. So it's a very cost-effective form of contraception, and it's greater than 99% effective. So with those two dynamics, and it is reimbursed, most women don't pay anything out of pocket. It's an in-office procedure, and we do not expect that necessarily, I mean, we don't really know our cost structure yet, but this is a very effective and cost-effective solution for women.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
And then
I do want to add, part of it's not just the IUD itself that, it's frameless, and everybody's, when you think about a plastic T-shaped frame, that looks pretty, as I said, archaic, and this sweet little smaller than a dime elliptical shape that's a triangle, and a lot of particularly younger women, love the fact that if they're athletes, that it conforms to their body, and those that it will conform to their body, and those types of benefits. But we've also, because the pain comes from the insertion process, and the insertion process is just a hard plastic applicator. And what we've done is we've completely redesigned the inserter and retriever, and we call this our slider system. It's patented, and we took the learnings from IVF, where the embryo transfer catheters are very small and flexible and less painful. And we're eliminating steps. We're eliminating at least 3 of the most painful steps of the IUD insertion process with our inserter. And obviously, we're eliminating the strings with our retriever. So the whole, basically, system of the frameless IUD and slider system, we believe, will check all the boxes for what women want.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's really great to hear. I feel this is something we touched on, Kyle, in our last discussion with Sarah on her products from Grace Enable, that you're taking this universal design approach. You're really working obviously with patients, understanding the form factors, the experience that they undergo through this type of procedure. But clearly there's a few challenges as you're going through this. So I wondered if we can now sort of think about some of those challenges. I know one you and I have spoken often about is fundraising. I'm sure for a lot of startups that has been particularly challenging in the past couple of years, but I think in general, we all know that women's health is drastically underfunded. So how has fundraising been for you since you started this organization?
Well, Richard, I will say our timing for launching 3Daughters in terms of fundraising was not optimum. I mean, probably had the biggest headwinds in this market, or in this space over the last 2 years, and we have had, fortunately, tremendous support from our lead investors, who are men, and decided basically on a personal level that women's health, as you said, was underfunded, and that this needed to be done. So we are so fortunate, and we have just completed the first tranche of our seed raise, $2 million. We're looking for another 1 million to close that, and then the Series A of 15 million. So it's not for the faint of heart, Richard, that's for sure. And Kyle, it's just getting the story out, and a lot of investors can relate to this story because it's a pretty simple message in terms of how we're addressing the problem. And we have an absolutely fabulous team of very experienced sharpshooters that have experience in women's health, and we know how to execute. So investors have related to one that we've done a lot with not a very large amount of money.
I mean,
What about the regulatory pathway here? Because we would imagine, you mentioned this 5-year journey, and typically there can be challenges there. Where do you stand from a regulatory standpoint, and especially with gathering all the data and proving the efficacy of your technology?
Well, that's a great question, Kyle. We fortunately have a very experienced regulatory group that knows this division of the FDA and has done a lot of clinical trials and FDA filings with this division. And it's somebody that I've worked with before. And our chief medical officer is reproductive endocrinologist. He's very strong on the clinical side. And I've worked with him before on another contraceptive product. So we know the regulatory pathway, and we basically are expecting to, and we get a lot of advice. We have a group of scientific advisors that's like the who's who in women's health, including the editor of Contraception and one of the leading IUD investigators in the US. So with that in hand, we have the pathway pretty well ironed out. I mean, with contraceptive trials, it's understood what you have to do. You just have to do it. So, and that's what I mean. We're planning on, once we complete phase 1, to be in discussions and then to work with a partner going forward.
and you mentioned there about building this really strong team. I wondered if we could bring in, you have a wonderful co-founder, Shelley, that you're on this journey together. What's the background of how you and Shelley came together on this idea and this innovation?
Well, I really have to credit Shelley because she was introduced to Carlos, our inventor, and then she became intrigued. She brought in a whole team of people to evaluate the technology, because Carlos, being a veterinarian, didn't understand all the ramifications of human clinical development. And I was part of that team. And then, I don't know, Shelley and I, it's so funny because I had a consulting practice for a long time, as did Shelley. We both did a lot of work in infertility. I managed Serono's infertility product line, and we had interacted off and on. And we both and I had a lot of opportunities to join companies and get involved with startups, but this was the first one that I really latched onto and said, wow, I don't want to say it was like love, but it was like, this is the one. And I can't speak for Shelley, but I think it was the same thing for her. And we just together, went after it and said to UMass, if we can get some grant funding, we'll kick off the company. And that's exactly what we did at the end of 2021. And I mean, since that time, we've had 2 FDA meetings, we've had prototypes, we've, filed patents. I could give you the list as long as my arm of things that we have just executed on, and really that's a credit to the team.
Yeah,
The
when I think
3D
of,
team, as I call them.
oh yeah, well, if I think of dynamic duos, I mean, the two of you jump to my mind always because I feel energized every time I get the chance to speak with you. And I think, as we know, like the passion that founders have for solving these big problems is so important. Not thinking just about the solution, but actually, this is a really significant problem. And again, it rings through loud and clear every time we connect and have the chance to talk about this, how passionate you are about solving this problem. So again, I take credit to you both because you do a wonderful job at that. And Kyle, we think about going on a journey and the steps that this involves. I think that's such an important part of it.
Absolutely. Yeah. We're always curious to kind of learn, hear, and understand. Mary Beth, what do you have in store over the next 6 to 18 months? Are there some, significant future milestones that you're looking to achieve or accomplish?
We always have milestones, Kyle. Our battle cry is we execute to milestones with capital efficiency. So And that, to the audience, that wasn't a plant. I think Kyle just asked that, but I stepped in. So yes, we're filing our IND this year. We've applied for a number of grants. We are preparing publications from our phase 1 study. And I mean, even though we haven't started yet, we'll have a publication strategy. We continue to build our patent portfolio. And believe me, I just want to say a plug for the 3D team, because I'm so proud of the people that we have on board, because we have a really high performance team. And the other thing is we're going to have another filing to the FDA next month. So we'll have had 3 filings even before, asking for their guidance, which has been positive, before we file the IND. So it ties in with the regulatory strategy of early, often, and transparent.
And you've been doing this obviously for a couple of years now, and you've been you're a businesswoman. You've had a lot of great experiences throughout your career. For aspiring entrepreneurs maybe looking to get into medical device, kind of what are a few pieces of advice that you might have for them?
That's a great question. And I just think that everyone should follow their own path and be confident with a startup, be flexible. Flexibility are us. And to be grateful for everything that comes in your pathway. I mean, this is a culmination of a long career. I never expected to be doing this at this point in my life, but it's something that, as Richard said, I am absolutely passionate about, because I want to leave my little mark on earth for women in some small and hopefully can be a big way to make a difference. So doing what you love is probably the bottom line, and getting good advice and listening.
Doing what you love. You heard it here. I think
That's
that's
right.
wonderful advice. I think, again, the fact that you are on this journey, you are clearly so passionate about it. That idea of staying open-minded is, again, a wonderful piece of advice. I think the fact that we get caught up sometimes in little moments naturally because we're very passionate, again, about what we're doing. But, thinking about the bigger picture and staying focused on that longer term aspiration is so important. And so the idea that you can stay open-minded but still stay focused on the goal is so crucial, so you can keep energized every day. I'm sure you have a big picture in mind as you look ahead and you think about where you'd like to see 3Daughters in 5-10 years time. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, Richard, I think I already let you in on the not so much of a secret anymore, that we really want our first product to be the first billion-dollar product in women's health. And that's a grandiose statement. There's always, drug development is messy, and we don't know what's in front of us, but we have a smart team. We know how to pivot and make adjustments, but we see 3Daughters as being a women's health development engine, because this platform has legs. And this was really Shelley's brainstorm, that we could use it for delivery of other API, active pharmaceutical ingredients, to the uterus beyond copper. So not just for contraception, but for uterine bleeding, for uterine cancer, for a number of conditions that occur in the uterus and I mean, I can go through a laundry list of women's health conditions, fibroids, that abnormal uterine bleeding that aren't well treated. So we see our first product in the hands of a major pharma that can actively get it to that billion-dollar level, and then that we will keep developing and innovating for women.
That's fantastic, Mary Beth. Now, it sounds like you've got a lot in store, actually, a lot more than maybe what we even really expected there. That sounds very exciting with those future technologies that you could potentially bring to the women's health market. So it sounds like you're setting, you know, you're setting up 3 Daughters to be something a lot bigger than, you know, going a lot further than contraception. So it's really a beautiful thing. How do folks get in touch with you?
Very easily. Email me directly. I answer my emails. mbcicero@3daughtershealth.com. We issue press releases, and our contact for those is Louis Scotty. He's the Senior VP of Business Operations and Corporate Development. And his email is lscotty@3daughtershealth.com. And I'm reluctant to give out my cell phone, but if need be, email me and I'll give you my cell phone.
Yes. And what about LinkedIn?
Oh, absolutely. I'm on LinkedIn, and follow 3 Daughters. Follow 3 Daughters. I hope you two are. I'm going to check it out.
We
Oh,
are, don't you worry. We're
yeah.
following
We
and
just
we're
posted
excited.
that we were nominated, well, not nominated, we were awarded 2024 Startup of the Year by Biolabs in Philadelphia.
Amazing.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. I think it's very deserving. And I think, you know, this mission you're on is something that everybody can get behind. You know, clearly it's there to help female patients
Thank
who
you,
are
Richard.
suffering. So we can only wish you well, and thank you again for joining us today.
Richard and Kyle, you guys are the best.
Thanks,
Thank
Mary
you.
Beth. Right back at you. And
Thank you. Thank
thanks
you.
for all you're doing for women's health. You know, especially as we're heading into May here with Women's Health Month. This is a really big deal. So we appreciate you sharing your story and technology with us today.
Yeah, everybody celebrate their mothers out there. That's right.
That's right. Awesome. All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, another huge thank you to Mary Beth Cicero, co-founder and CEO of 3 Daughters. And thank you for tuning in for another episode of the MedTech Impact Podcast. I'm Kyle Cruz.
And I'm Richard Meiklejohn. Until next time, keep innovating.